I remember my mother would say, "Come home when the sun comes down." And I wouldn't see a parent until I came home. And we don't live in a time like that anymore.
When I was a kid and just spent a lot of time poking around the mud flats and things like that.
And when I was a child, I used to play outside in the dirt, and we used to make mud pies. Now children don't make mud pies. You know, they don't make mud pies no more.
I think we protect our kids a lot right now from that kind of stuff. We have a lot of organized play dates. We have a lot of sterilized rooms. We have a lot of controlled activity. And I feel like our kids are losing touch with nature.
Video games. I was always outside running around when I was a little kid. You know, I was always in the woods, running in rivers around my neighborhood in the county and stuff like that. Compared to now, the kids just play video games all day. So it's like trapped and they're confined in their homes.
A lot of the media has gotten young folks and people away from being outdoors. They'll experience in a virtual way as opposed to really being out there.
You know, children today spend on average over 44 hours a week in front of a monitor of one sort or another, television screen or a computer monitor, and less than 40 minutes outside.
Health has declined, physical health has declined, and mental health seems to be declining as well. And by that I mean, besides the obvious increases of asthma and obesity and inattention, we also have bullying and aggression.
For all of human history and prehistory, children spent their formative years either playing or working in natural settings. And so within the space of maybe 3 decades, we're seeing the virtual disappearance of this relationship between children and nature. This generation of children may be the first to really have a disconnection from nature that is considered the norm. Evolution doesn't happen that quickly. We're experimenting with our children and basically raising them under protective house arrest. And this has happened quite suddenly, and there have to be implications to that, psychological, physical, spiritual. E.O. Wilson talks about what he calls his biophilia hypothesis, which is that we are hardwired to love nature, that we need it, and when we don't get enough of it, we don't do so well.
We're a biological animal. We evolved in a biocentric world. Why do we like rainbows? You know, why do we like fast-flowing streams? Why do we like seeing often long distances, but from a protected setting?
What is that?
That's the environment we evolved under, but we live in a very different world today. And in fact, progress in civilization is measured by how much we've transcended those biological and animal roots.
We have a school that's on a busy street in a storefront. And in the back we have a postage stamp play lot that has a beautiful climbing structure, but every step is equidistant from the next one. All of the handholds are the same diameter. And so very little critical thinking has to go into playing on these things. But we can walk around the corner and go into the woods of Rock Creek Park.
Let's boogie down the trail. Are you ready? Here we go.
And have vines we can swing that make jump ropes. or slide down muddy hills, or climb through hollow logs.
I got 2 more tickets. Okay. That equals.
It's just like a tunnel, right? But it's so different. It has a fresh smell.
Is somebody coming behind you?
Studies that have compared kids playing in a natural play space to a flat asphalt or cement playground. The kids in the natural play space are far more likely to invent their own games.
Really, from birth on, nature informs the development of the brain, and it's through the senses. So everything that we see, hear, and feel, the gentlest touch on the skin, or something that's very sharp or pointy, all these things inform the brain in a way that we cannot replicate in an indoor environment. You can never have the variety or the richness or the spontaneous emergence of the things that you have out in nature. There are times when you can almost hear their brains sizzling as the neural connections are being made.
If it rains, oh, it's fun. It's a fun day. Everybody else outside, they're stomping and tromping, and it's really just fun. They're embracing nature as what we should do, not be afraid of it or run from it, but just embrace it. And they have gotten that.
Yes, I do. I did. Up on right here. Okay. That's you. Up on right here. Okay. No, but it smells like chocolate. But it isn't. It's nature isn't made of chocolate. Yes, it is. No, it isn't. Yes, it is.
It's kind of like an invisible school.
Mommy, there's a ducky. I see. A ducky.
You see duckies?
Let's go see ducky.
Let's quietly fox walk up to them so we don't scare them away, and then we can look at
The kids don't notice that they're learning at this, meteoric pace. They don't understand that they're doing anything but playing and exploring and investigating. They feel like the characters in the stories that they make up while they're out there. They feel like pirates or explorers or fairy princesses, gathering their treasures.
And we have wonderful lessons about these things. Why do leaves fall from tree? What is actually happening? Our children know about precipitation and about rainfall and the rain cycle and all of that. They do know of it. If we weren't taking them out there, we couldn't draft that into the lesson and get them to understand it so smoothly.
That's what makes the
It
difference.
rained last night, though. But then why is the water so calm? Look, Miss.
Why do you think that could be?
There's rain on the other side.
It went to the other side. Where does this water go? Do you remember?
Soapstone Alley.
Goes down Soapstone Stream, and then it goes into which creek?
Look at
Rock Creek.
Potomac.
And then the Potomac River.
And then into the Chesapeake Bay.
After it goes into the ocean, where does it go?
The Atlantic Ocean.
The Atlantic Ocean, and then what does it do?
It goes up to the sky. Up.
In the sky?
And then it evaporates.
Yes. And then?
It starts to rain again, falls back into the water, and then the water goes back into the stream, and then it goes all the way back, and it goes around and around and around and around. In a big
Well, maybe that's what.
The most fun days are the days when we find something that's really disgusting, yucky, stinky, because it always generates so much exuberance. When they're in that heightened sense of, ew, that's gross. And they're all pressing in to look closer or to actually feel the slug or the worm. Then they start to notice the other things that are going on around. It's this electric response.
Hey, Daddy, why are your legs so long? Hey, Daddy, why are your legs so long?
The yellow frogs. A poisonous
Oftentimes, the troublemaker in the class becomes the leader when you get them out into nature.
Great job,
Oh,
Eli.
yeah.
Good job.
Into my laser beam.
And we find that children, when you put them out in those kinds of environments, there's far less aggression toward one another and more what they call pro-social behavior, where they're cooperating.
I had 3 children in my class who wouldn't say a word during circle time discussion or anything. And there were those who would just participate minimally. From the time we were going out into nature and coming back, and when we talk about in the circle about anything in relation to nature, those kids are participating.
I had so many fears. The safety issue was one. I am responsible for all these children, and I didn't want to come back to school writing up a whole bunch of unlucky duck reports about the things that happened to them. I'm always counting them. I'm still always counting them, even though they have never, I've never lost one. I've never not known where they were.
We have to begin to think in terms of comparative risk. Yes, there's risk outdoors, but there's also huge risk in raising a generation under protective house arrest. A risk to their creativity, a risk to their sense of community. There is a risk to their physical health, their psychological health, their spiritual health. Want a real risk? Look at child obesity. Pediatricians are saying this generation may be the first to have a lower life expectancy than their own parents in our history. That's a real risk.
Change your pants. Come on.
I personally feel that the neighborhood is safe and that Will is free to run around like that. And there are a handful of other kids who have that freedom as well. On the other hand, I think there are a lot of kids who don't quite have that freedom.
Even in perfectly safe little American towns and cities that are the great places for kids to do this stuff, they're not doing it. They're locked up indoors in electronic recreation or in organized sports.
Can we show you our fairy house that's been made in here?
Right there.
Someone was wrapped. We got one word.
As a parent, I struggled with this fear too. I don't look down my nose at people that feel that sense of fear. When you look at the statistics on stranger danger, you'll find that the actual number of stranger abductions, for instance, has been going down for about 20 years. That there's actually relatively very few stranger abductions. Now, one is too many, but compared to what we think is happening out there, our fears are in many ways created by my profession of journalism. They take a handful of terrible crimes against children every year, and they repeat them over and over and over again. And that's the very definition of conditioning. We're being conditioned to live in a state of fear.
He needs freedom to explore independently, to explore the world, his world, whether it's the yard, the neighborhood, a friendship, and just wander around in the hedgerows in the neighborhood. There's so much to be seen there.
And they can hide behind there if they're like getting attacked.
Damming a little creek, digging a hole, building a fort, watching butterflies. What they need is hands dirty, feet wet experience in nature.
It's like, what a great place to make fairy houses. So we just started making fairy houses, and then we came up with Fairy House Village.
When I was 8 years old, I was leaning on the heater in the classroom, and I was looking out the window at the butterflies that were playing around in the plants around the trees. I felt this deep longing to be outside with them, you know? I was just dreaming out the window. And it was a pure state, innocent, pure, full of love and wonder. And the teacher had been calling my name, but I didn't hear her because I was actually out the window. In my mind, I was with those butterflies. And she got more and more intense. And by the time I figured out she was talking to me, she was shouting, screaming at me. And I felt my heart break. And I thought, oh, I guess I have to forget about all that now.
Almost to a person, anyone who identifies themselves as someone who is a conservationist, environmentalist, someone with ecological sensibility, whatever we want to call that, almost to a person, they had some transcendent experience in nature when they were kids. Now, what happens if that virtually ends? Where will the true stewards of the earth come from?
The crayfish. There's another spot Jarrell can show y'all where it's a stream that goes back there. We come to this park a lot. We are about teaching and educating, but I don't think you can have a real appreciation for nature unless you're out and you're in it and you're interacting in it. They have to have the freedom to go and explore and be one with it. What's that plant? What's this tree? What made that print? What's that bird? What's that noise?
Where does the water come from?
Yeah.
You know, all types of questions. Just they're sponges, and whatever we can, as far as knowledge, impart to them, we do. You know.
Right here.
We used to talk to them about maybe deforestation, and that means nothing to someone if there's no trees in your neighborhood. So I mean, like, just kind of showing them that they are connected and that they do have to be stewards of this planet because we only got one. So I mean, they gotta do their part to take care of it. And if everybody's doing their part, we live in a lot better place.
If you need some help, here.
When we first started, they wouldn't be so excited about the park, you know what I mean? Like, oh, let's go to the Y instead. We just want to play basketball. We want to play basketball. But now, anytime it's even close to a nice day, it's like, oh, let's go to the park instead. They raise their hands. Ah, we're free. No more city, no more blocks and brick and concrete, you know what I mean? It's fresh air and stuff.
Nature is a place to go. Nature is a place to go. Sixth graders pulled the cement so that there'll be more grass in nature, and we planted the bird and butterfly garden to beautify and help birds and butterflies and insects have a quiet and peaceful habitat.
They get to be a part of nature. What's going on outside, they can smell it, they can see it, they can feel it. And in the classroom, you're limited to how much you can do if you keep the children inside.
And a lot of the schools are teaching to the test. They're talking about math, science in a contained area, not outdoors, not connecting it to nature, not connecting it to things that are real, and they're connected to data, graphs.
That's, you know, one form of learning. It's narrow, it leaves out a lot, and it's exhausting.
But we don't teach in that way. We teach where the kids have to think on their own. They have to really think about what they're doing. They have to observe. They have to feel, touch. When you can use all your senses, when you're sitting at that test, a lot of that stuff just comes to you, and it's not where it's been drilled into you all day long.
Look, Ms. Johnson. I see a worm. Ew. When you are sitting around watching TV or playing on the computer, you'll see things like outside nature things, but you don't want to explore it by watching TV. When you watch TV, you don't have experience. It's just not that fun just to watch it. It's fun more to see it and to observe it and see what kind of things is going on with it. Put your hand in the dirt.
I think of the fort or the special place as a chrysalis. It's where the self is being formed. And while the self is being formed, it's fragile and it needs to be in a protected place. You need to separate from the mother and family and your house. You have to create your own house, but you do it in a very simple, child-friendly kind of way first. It doesn't matter whether it's in an urban setting or a rural setting or in England or in sub-Saharan Africa. The fact that this happens kind of consistently across cultures and environmental character suggests that it's something that's coming from inside kids rather than something that they're learning about and then doing.
We need to put more stuff over there. Like,
You're building your self-concept. You're exercising your creative impulse. You're being imaginative. You're being a problem solver. You're being a critical thinker. You're exercising mastery skills. You know, you're actually trying to master your environment. You know, all this is the stuff of what makes us effective. Whether we're eventually become an investment banker on Wall Street or a forester living off the land, you know, you got to exercise all those skills.
break that big one against the shed. Again? It's already broken.
In play theory, there is what's called the loose parts theory. The more loose parts there are in an environment, the more creative play becomes. When a child is out in nature, even if it's in a backyard, that's where the loose parts are. It's not only the loose physical parts, it's the loose parts of imagination. It's connecting the dots of seeing patterns. That's intimately related to the ability to be creative, is to see patterns.
Yeah, just a little more.
Early next week, we spend nearly all of our time in schools with children sitting in desks inside, working together. But it seems to me that a little bit of balance is needed, where they're allowed some time to be outside and to be alone, to reflect on things that are important to them. Those opportunities are very rare, if they exist at all, for children today.
I was listening to the wind, and it's almost like the wind has two different sides of it. On a nice day like today, it's calm and peaceful. And then during a storm, when it's blowing and howling, it might be kind of scary. To me, it's saying you don't always need to be happy or always need to be sad. There's a time and place for everything.
Very, very nice analogy to the wind.
There's this smaller tree that is just like growing, and there's bigger trees around it. And I was thinking that you could learn a lesson from trees, that they have the will to never stop growing, to just keep reaching out to the sun, even if there's bigger trees blocking its way, but it'll still reach the sunlight one day.
That's so powerful. There's a scientific name for it. It's called phototropism. And this is a tendency for all plants to do what? To grow to the light. So plants will reach towards light. So how does that relate to our lives, Karen?
It's like sometimes there'll be people that are like stronger and bigger than you, but it doesn't mean they're like just better at everything than you, and you could have your own like advantages to them.
Absolutely. So keep growing towards the light, regardless of your size. And those young, small trees have to try a little bit harder, but eventually they get tall. I've been in the classroom about 28 years now, and during that time, certainly the influence of media has intensified. It's always been there, but it's pervasive. When they want information, they don't go to a book. They will just Google it. So whether we like it or not, we are a technological society and people. There's no going back in that respect, I don't think. Given that, technology is a very powerful tool for good and for bad. And this is very much the case with children. We can point to a lot of instances where we see the bad, where they are in front of screens for a good part of their life, not really interacting, but being fed whatever it is that is coming through that screen.
I see some kids who are addicted to the Game Boys and Xboxes and the iPods and the DVDs. And I was working in the Boys and Girls Club. Young kids would come in and they would focus on the screen, and they wouldn't even talk to each other anymore. It was them and the machine.
And this can be very harmful, but that technology can be used to create experiences for them where they have a deeper understanding of the natural world. So it's a balance. We'll need both of these pieces to become a species that is around a little bit longer.
I'm all for technology. I love my iPhone. but it's not doing the trick. It's not accomplishing what we want to accomplish, which is to have smart, creative, whole kids come out of our school districts. This is not an anti-technology argument. It is to say, however, that the human organism is based in nature, not inside a computer. To the extent that we overload our kids with computers, we are denying them the ability to feel fully alive. Why would we want to deny our kids the ability to feel fully alive?
We took our first group camping, and these kids are so tough, you know, they live in the city. It got dark, and you start hearing all the crickets and the sounds, and you could just see them all like huddled up in the tent like, I don't want to go out there. What is out there? Oh my God. You know, they're so used to being in this, you know, I'm like, this is nothing like your neighborhood. Your neighborhood's so much more dangerous, but
it's too quiet out here. It's too quiet. You know, they're not used to the quiet. That becomes a fear, the quiet, because usually when there's some kind of a quiet, it's either right before or right after something traumatic has happened. There's that silence, and they're afraid of silence.
Introducing them to the new experiences, you know, like when we took them snowboarding, they saw a cow, and it was the first time they've ever seen a cow in real life. You know what I mean? And they were like, oh my God, a cow, you know, and to us, it's like, what, you've never seen a cow before? Like, no way, but they were just so amazed, you know, when they saw the hill, like the snow slope, they were like, oh, we gotta sled down that hill? There's no way. I'm like, that's a mountain, it's not just a hill. Yeah. But yeah, you're gonna, you know, and just to see that and to introduce them to, hey, there is more in this world than just this city, than just your block here, you know, and there's so much more to see.
Exposure, exposure, exposure. Once I get a group of youngsters out to the outdoors, it becomes almost like a word-of-mouth epidemic that they're talking to friends and other peers about, we did this, and I did this, and I did that. So it's about exposure. Very simply, taking them there.
Oh yeah, we went on an Adirondack trip up north, and we were out there for a week. It was very relaxing. And like once you wake up, you just like start sniffing the air. I tasted it.
You tasted that?
Yeah, it tasted good. It tasted fresh.
You want to go just to number 10 and 2.
Something new. Instead of doing the same things over and over. I like to get out and explore. And then I feel a sense of, I calm down when I come outside. So this is like my relaxed moment. It's the only thing I got.
Most of the young people that I work with can ill afford a pair of hiking boots or even a fishing rod. I had some nature programs where Mom would tell me that, you know, I can't afford to think about a canoe or a kayak. I got to think about lunch money. So it's economics, it's access, and it's being exposed.
I don't think we should always assume that inner city kids have a lot less than suburban kids, middle-class kids. I mean, some of the most impoverished environments in the world are suburban areas that have been paved over. There's no real place to walk in nature. They're driven everywhere. So we've gotten richer than ever before. We seem to be more impoverished than ever before in terms of our experiential connection to nature.
What a fish.
I've seen some young folks that thought they had to be real tough and get them out in the woods and give them a dozen of night crawlers. They were afraid to put a worm on a hook.
I got it. Grab it from the bottom. Give it. You. I'm not trying to get stabbed. I already got stabbed by the hook. Patrick! I'm scared of it. I'm scared.
Everybody's out here doing the same thing. It's okay to be afraid and say I'm afraid. And I don't know and I want to know because they're excited about how do you get in a kayak? Why is that salamander that color?
Spine over his back. So if you grab him like this, it's gonna hurt you. So all you do is grab it like that, and then you take his hook out.
It's really on him.
Nah, he's fine.
You should let me have that hook.
A little more? That's a third.
I have some friends that do this, but some of them just like staying in the house playing video games all day. I try to get them outside, but they don't like nature.
That's good. And 3 again. 1, 2, 3.
Like, some people say they don't like nature, like being outside because of the bugs and stuff, but that's what nature is. It's a bunch of bugs and stuff. My mom, she likes when I go out with Brother Yusuf because she says she'd rather have me out with Brother Yusuf than in the streets.
That's somebody's lunch bag.
She doesn't ever want me to buy a gun. So she said, I'll buy you an airing that has a gun, so you won't end up having a gun. I want to be like Brother Yusuf, like teach kids how to be outside all the time and stuff.
Like if you had a ring like this?
When I give them a rod, it's primary attention now that they're getting. They're connected with the source of nature, the water, the fish, the hook, the line. And then there's someone talking them through how to untangle something or what to catch.
Throw back. Now take your hand and wipe it on your pants. Your mom will like that.
Mommy, can I get my other shoe?
Good luck.
Okay, Rich, let's go get one.
Good luck. Here she goes. Good luck, Dad.
When we cross the brook, over here, we'll load it up, okay? Why don't you take a look into the woods through your scope so you can get a sight, okay? Look over there somewhere so you can see. Tell me if you can see, all right? Is that sight good?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Aim at that stuff down here. See if you can see anything with your scope.
Yeah.
Go slow. Look around. Sight that big tree in. See that big tree down here? See that white birch there?
Children's involvement in hunting is an avenue to self-confidence and the ability to be alone and to be self-reliant in a situation that takes something. I mean, it takes something to sit quietly. It takes something to be responsible for a firearm or a bow.
Just put this on your lap.
It takes something to be present to the outdoors in a way that you know animal sign and you learn to track and to take responsibility for taking a life. There's a real opportunity in hunting and fishing and being in the outdoors where you're actually using a resource and having to be responsible for it. Hopefully, in that, there'll be a responsibility to serve and nurture nature.
Make sure you keep an eye out in front of you because there's going to be a deer somewhere around here.
I'm a deer hunter, and it followed for me in being, I think, introduced at an early age to raising animals for meat and taking care of them and respecting them. And then hunting in the same manner.
All right, that's good.
I don't take lightly the killing of an animal, but I also am willing to be responsible for it. If I was going to eat meat, my willingness to be responsible for it felt like the right thing to do. That juxtaposition of loving them and killing them is something that I had to come to terms with. And I don't necessarily think that everyone can understand that.
Children who grow up close to nature have a very different relationship to death than people who don't. They see it all the time, and they have to tackle the deep questions. They love that robin that sings in the yard, and they love the fact that she's sitting on the eggs and now there's babies in there, and they just take joy in that. And then comes the raven, who they also love because the raven has made these funny sounds and his hair has stood up, you know, and he's made them crack up as little kids, you know, and they're like, I love that raven, he's so interesting. And then one day they have to witness this extreme drama, the extreme agony of these parents and this intensity of this nest predator who comes in and takes the babies and then flies off. You know, the kids, they just have to stand there and ask these deep existential questions, you know. They can't escape that. Nature is full of that story everywhere you look. And eventually, of course, they naturally look at themselves. I guess I'm not going to be here forever either. And they begin to think about the Creator. Why is it so?
My younger son came up to me when he was about 5 and asked me, Dad, are God and Mother Nature married, or are they just good friends? I think it's a profound question. Across the board, from the very conservative religious folks to atheists, people talk about nature using religious language, spiritual language. They talk about the creation. Atheists talk about the creation. Perhaps you remember that sense of awe and wonder when you first heard wind in the trees. And when you heard something in nature, a voice that you didn't hear anywhere else. That's one of the first windows into a sense of wonder, which leads to all spirituality.
The source of spirituality is not just the beauty and the wonder and the magnificence of the world around us, but it's also the other side. It's seeing something that's larger than yourself. It's seeing death and decay. It's seeing the movement of materials through the system. It's experiencing your limitations and your mortality and your vulnerability.
And also some quality of peace, a real connection to ourselves and to others that comes out of our relationship with nature. Being in nature keeps me compassionate. It keeps me present to life.
Be smart, Spencer.
In adolescence, children begin to realize that they really have to negotiate a much larger world and have to be accepted in that world. And it's very, as we all know, because of that, it's a very stressful period.
The social fabric and network becomes much more important. And so, to a certain extent, play in the natural world is left behind because you need to move into relationships and friendships and social hierarchies and trying to figure out who yourself is there.
One of the things that I wonder is when kids go away to college and then they come back and they get together with their buddies in the future, are they going to sit around and say, God, you remember that time we scored so well on Grand Theft Auto? Wasn't that awesome? That sounds like a kind of a boring conversation. As opposed to, do you remember that time we went camping, man, and it started thundering and lightning, and we were scared, and wasn't that great? Wasn't that awesome? Now that's a story that you want to tell to your children. You're not going to want to tell your children about the time you scored really well on a Nintendo game.
And when children completely grow up in a cocoon, a protected cocoon, they're not typically very resilient or adaptive to the stresses and strains and challenges they're going to face in life. You know, in our best of intentions to protect our children from everything, we maybe have protected them too much. Would it be better to keep our kids totally apart from snakes and spiders and storms and, you know, and rushing waters? Well, yeah, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe if they were completely protected from that, it would be a disservice.
Risk is really important for young people. Risk-taking, you cannot remove it. If you don't have healthy risks, they're going to be unhealthy risks. We're seeing this all over the place. I've been working with kids for 25 years. All the kids thrive on taking risks. They just love the feeling in your stomach, regardless of their temperament. So this is a 6 months experience, and this is a 600-mile journey by ski and canoe. We start with students who might have never skied before. We start with students who've never seen snow before. We start with students who might have never camped before. They're learning about the birthright of a human being to use Earth resources, but in a way that is sustainable, ethical to all the beings, to the trees and to the animals and to the people. And what they're really learning is how to honestly express themselves, how not to be afraid of who they are, how to learn to love themselves.
I just learned a lot about fire. Me and fire had some pretty close relationships in different ways, and that's pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to going on these mini group solos. That's gonna be real awesome. To just go off with a few people, pick our own route.
We look at students all together as a group and individually and decide what would be most beneficial for them for this last week. What we've decided is to have one of our older students, Ethan, to go by himself, and then have 2 groups of 4 and 1 group of 3.
I'm really excited. I've never been without human contact for 5 days. I don't think most people in their entire lives spend 5 days completely alone.
One thing you guys realize that this whole thing about letting you off for 5 days is not a customary thing to do in the American outdoor education. So that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you prepare for this. Sure, we have to be conscious of safety, but it still has to be real for them. And so this is as real as could be. There's not a trail that they follow. They have to follow a variety of trails and no trails. If at the end you don't give people a practical exam, where is the validation? This is a validation. And there is risk. It's not a matter of removing the risk. It's a matter of managing this risk correctly. And we worked very, very hard to prepare them. But the right choices they're going to make on the trail are going to come from their heart. You learn in this work to let go of all the expectations. Because that's my work now, is to receive them with the open arms and to hear without judgment whatever they're going to tell me.
He wanted to go over the mountains, and then Ari's pole broke. That was kind of expected, but and then about 5 minutes later, my pole broke.
very unexpectedly, just totally out of the blue. My pole was totally fine. And we just kind of really took that as a sign that we shouldn't go over the mountains. We saw Ethan, who was by himself. We saw his tracks a lot.
There's Ethan.
Ethan.
How was going up Mount Pisgah?
It was intense. I thought it was going to be so much easier. When I got up, I was so cold. It was scary. I was shivering. It must have been below zero.
Yeah, and what did you do? You start the fire?
So yeah, I just started a fire.
Is it hard to be by yourself?
It got kind of lonely sometimes. Such an important part of this is like the community. It's like so important.
You see it in their eyes. Their eyes get real clear. They look you in the eye.
And that night it was red skies and the pink and the purple clouds and the mountains were all purple. And we got to watch that for about a minute.
Radiates on everyone, and the more that I give, the more I got to give.
They carry with them this beautiful woods energy that they bring into the world. And some of them make it stick.
Lessons on the meal. For dinner tonight, we have beans and cheese.
Yeah! Like last night.
When the ice goes, they're gonna paddle their new-made canoe up the Clyde River and down Connecticut River and up the Cold River, and they'll arrive home on around 22nd of May. So they'll have a 30-day river journey.
Learning how to live with the same 15 people over 5 months. That's been a really cool growing experience.
They cook all their food. They create their housing. They create their classroom. And the feeling that comes from self-sufficiency is incredible. It's incredible pride that they take, wow, we can.
A lot of people that came sort of unsure about living in the woods, living in this world, and now much more empowered and strong and just glad to be who they are and much more comfortable living in the woods, but also just living in this world, I think.
Kids at the adolescent period really do need social peer group experiences. If nature is experienced with their peers, then it can be extremely important. In other words, they're experiencing nature almost in a kind of like a little troop that moves through nature like a little primate group.
I just feel so deeply connected and in love with this group of people. You know, they're my family. I've lived with them every day for what seems like forever. You know, I eat with them and I sleep with them, and I've come to know them better than I know almost anyone else in the whole world. Really, the more you get to know someone, the more you love them. And it's like there's no way around it.
That's what connection is. The deep feeling of everything and the deep love and appreciation of all that is. And you cherish every moment that you get to breathe. There's a song that moves through time that has an archetypal value that goes way beyond our ability to capture it and abstract it or even talk about it in any meaningful way. And all that's left is poetry and song and dance and tears and laughter, deep laughter, and a love of life. And And that's what connection feels like.
What I get nervous about is that people will say, "Oh, nature, it's the panacea, you know, it's the new magic bullet that's going to make us happy." And so we'll just drop off kids in nature and they'll be happy. Well, they won't, because that's not the world we live in.
Listen to my heart song.
The transition, it could be tough. Have I seen kids get depressed after the semester? Yes.
I will never forget you. I will never forsake you.
We work very hard on this, and there's no one answer.
Listen, listen, listen to my heart song.
The worst feedback I get from parents, this is my nightmare. My child moved back into the backyard. They're sleeping in the tent on the ground, and we bring them meals out there. That's the worst.
Who are these young people going to be? They're just powerful beings. And that's because they've been mentored to turn on all their switches.
I mean, anything can happen, and we're really let loose now. I feel like we can do anything we set our minds to. We really can't help change the world.
He'll turn over logs looking for salamanders, turn over rocks, find a stream.
And he notices every bird sound and he wants to try to identify them. He's really interested in every bug and every leaf.
And so now he knows he can go to the honeysuckle bush and pick the part out, and that's where all the sugar is. Sugar in the honeysuckle.
He likes it. He's happy. And so, yes, we kick him out the door.
The health of a human being and the health of our culture lies in our ability to bring that connection to nature back in.
It makes for the wrongness. How can you truly be a complete person and not embrace the thing that feeds you, the thing that molds you?
To care for another human being, or care for nature, or care for a plant, or care for an animal is something that's internalized by being out in nature. And they transfer that over to the families and communities and neighborhoods.
When you start thinking about schools and workplaces and homes and neighborhoods and cities that actually, through the infusion of nature into everyday life, become happier and healthier and smarter places, that's an exciting future.
Lo siento en mi cuerpo, en mi espíritu, en mi alma. Heya, 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 ho. Heya, 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 ho. Heya, 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 heya. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the kiss the ground. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground.